Well, hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another installment of my ongoing DC Rebirth reading guide. Today's video 4.2, which is the second video in section 4 of the DC Core Rebirth guide. This is part of the Teen Titans section of that universe, and specifically today we're just going to do an end-to-end run through of all of Deathstroke. As a quick intro as to where this fits in my overarching sort of series and channel, we have to remember I've read the entirety of DC Rebirth. That's over 3,370 issues, and what I'm covering now in the core section is the fundamental issue related to the main DC Rebirth core continuity. That's 2,724 single issues. If you have a look here are the playlists on my channel. This should hopefully make this a lot simpler for you to understand. There's one playlist just called DC Rebirth All that contains absolutely everything. Every single DC Rebirth video I have done and ever will do. However, I've split that into 3 separate curated lists, which you can pick if you'd rather just have something a little bit more tailored. One of them is for the stuff that's non-core continuity. That's like Black Label, out of continuity, deceased, stuff like that. If you're not interested in that playlist, there's another one which is just of all my custom binds in the DC Rebirth universe. There's quite a lot on there now, and there will be more in the future. And of course, there's the playlist where this video is involved, which is the Core Rebirth in Continuity reading guide, which is going to cover, as I say, over 2,700 single issues. Hopefully that helps. I would remind you that before you watch this video, you need to go back and watch the introduction video for the series, video 0.0, because that sets the scene for this whole era of comics, where it fits in and where it dovetails in straight after my new 52 reading guide as well. It also covers some key concepts of vocabulary that I use often, like volumes with a big V, volumes with a small v, and type P and J readers, which I'm not going to explain when I cover them in the videos. But anyway, that's the usual introduction out of the way. Right, without any further ado, let's look at the Teen Titans part of this universe, and let's look at Deathstroke. And here we are, back at the map again. As per normal, we've got the specific map for the Teen Titans corner of the core DC Rebirth universe. We have the overarching strategic view at the top, and then we're going to go into the granular trade paperback view at the bottom. So today we're going to talk about Deathstroke, because last time we talked about Teen Titans, and Deathstroke is here. In the middle, we're going to talk about Deathstroke. We're going to get to the Lazarus contract, which we talked about last time, but out of fairness, I'm going to talk about it again here. Deathstroke does not intersect with Dark Knight's metal, so you can ignore that. It then just carries on straight here. It doesn't intersect with No Justice, so you can ignore that. It does then intersect with Terminus Agenda. Fine, fair enough. And then it ends with the Year of the Villain tie-in issues. So in a lot of ways, it's really, really straightforward. Okay, well, with that overarching perspective, and like I say, I do think it's useful to get that kind of event-led context before we go any further. With that out of the way, let's dive down to the trade paperback level. So, we have it here, and keep in mind we're looking at the one in the middle, Deathstroke. So, just to start off with, this Deathstroke series, which ran from 2016, is written by Christopher Priest. Now, Christopher Priest is a long-standing Deathstroke writer. He's very good. I don't know why he's stuck with Deathstroke for some reason, but he's a very good writer and writes a lot of really, really interesting stuff. So what we have here is we have Deathstroke, the series, and it starts off like this. Now, it's worth noting that the publication of Deathstroke is pretty intense. So in the time that Teen Titans only released one trade collection before it went into the Lazarus contract, Deathstroke released 3. So the first one, this one you can see here, is a volume with a small V1 called The Professional. It contains the Deathstroke Rebirth one-shot and then issues 1 to 5. The next one is the one you can see here in the middle, which is volume with a small V2 called The Gospel of Slade. That contains issues 6 to 11. It does make some reference to the events of things that Superman's up to over in the Aquaman series, but there aren't any details, so you don't need to worry about it especially. And by this point, the artist has already changed from Joe Bennett, who started the series, to just a cast of rotating artists. The third collection here is called Twilight. This is the cover, and it's a volume with a small V3, so the third volume, and it contains issues 12 to 18. So overall, this contains the Rebirth one-shot that launches Deathstroke, and then 18 single issues in linear sequence. That then takes us into the Lazarus contract, which we'll talk about now. So here we are again on the Lazarus contract. So as we talked about in the last video, I'm going to go through it again and do a quick overview of it. And as I did last time, I'm going to show you a Thomas Judge event map version, which is literally just this page. And then I'll also show you one I got from the DC artists, like the DC ad company. And I'll just ask you what your opinion is and which one you think I should go with as a future style, because I was interested in your opinion. So what is this event? Well, the Lazarus contract to start with, we just need to keep in mind the name itself is a reference to the Judas contract, which is the 1984 series, which was really kind of landmark and had all these twists and turns about Teen Titans that made a really big impact at the time. In the last video, I just showed this image, which is from the 2017 animated DC movie for the Judas contract. But some people pointed out that actually they didn't want to see that. They wanted to see the original 1984 artwork. So here you are. This is the original 1984 artwork. This is what it looked like. I didn't include it last time because I don't like 80s stories. It's too old for me. I don't like the artwork. I don't like the writing. But if you are interested, this is the sort of thing you can expect if you try to track down the original Judas contract. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get back to the Lazarus contract from the DC Rebirth era. This is a Deathstroke Teen Titans crossover event, obviously featuring Titans throughout as well, and featuring the Flash. The story revolves around Deathstroke trying to steal the Flash's powers to travel back in time to save his son. It contains the following issues, obviously Titans 11, then Teen Titans 8, Deathstroke 19. Remember, Deathstroke 19, if you read it in singles, does say to be continued in Teen Titans Annual 1. That's not true. When it says Annual 1, what it actually means is the Teen Titans Lazarus Contract Special. And then after that, you then have Deathstroke 20. So it only has one Titans issue, even though it has Titans all over the cover. If we look here at the ad or the placement spot that was given by DC Comics and their ad team to do this, it contains the first 4 issues. It says Titans 11, Teen Titans 8, Deathstroke 19, and then the Lazarus Contract Special in Teen Titans. But it doesn't mention Deathstroke 20, even though Deathstroke 20 is included in the actual collected edition of Lazarus Contract. So this is another thing that, tongue-in-cheek, I will say, is the fault of the DC intern. Did no one tell the DC intern that there was a 5th issue? This guide is slightly wrong. But that said, what do you think? What kind of art style works better? The really plain one or this kind of quite exciting DC ad-based guide? Anyway, enough of that. That's Lazarus Contract. Let's get back to the map. So back at the map, we can see the Lazarus Contract here, and then out of the Lazarus Contract, after the final issue in that, which was Deathstroke 20, we then go into this volume, which is volume with a small v4, Defiance. Now, Defiance contains issues 21 to 25, and also an excerpt from the DC Universe Holiday Special, which is actually the mini-story called A Wilson Family Christmas. At this point, the artist kind of stabilizes to someone called Diogenes Nevis. So at least you have that. Now keep in mind that Deathstroke in no way intersects with Dark Knight's Metal. It just ignores that event entirely, hence we've got this little air gap here. And it then continues on to the next volume, which is volume with a small v5, and it's called The Fall of Slade. And this is a volume that takes place, if you're obsessed with continuity, which please don't be a type P, but if you are a type P, it's between Dark Knight's Metal and No Justice. And this volume, volume 5, The Fall of Slade, contains issues 26 to 27, then Deathstroke Annual 1, and then 28 to 29. Now, it's worth noting the Deathstroke Annual 1 ends with kind of a cliffhanger to do with the character Power Girl. And like I say, that's the middle issue of this trade collection. That cliffhanger is never resolved. It's something that Christopher Priest set up because he was really hoping it would work as kind of a backdoor pilot to elicit enough interest to be able to write his own Power Girl series. That never happened. Power Girl seems to be pretty much monopolised by Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner, and I would have personally loved to have seen the Christopher Priest version of that character, but unfortunately the cliffhanger at the end of Annual 1 here never goes anywhere. Another thing worth noting about this particular volume, The Fall of Slade, is that it does feature the character of Kong Keenan, who is actually from the Superman family, but more accurately, Kong Keenan is from the New 52 Epilogues family, which was section 1 of this entire guide. He's the character called New Superman, and whilst his trades are branded DC Rebirth, he as a character, his story, everything about him is very much kind of a New 52 epilogue. But if you want to know more, watch those videos in section 1 of this guide. So anyway, this then skips No Justice entirely and then moves on here. Now, restrain your excitement. We now have Batman versus Deathstroke, and I'm not going to lie, it's actually an awesome story. It's a great comic. I've got the trade paperback. It's really loads of fun, and it's set between this, Volume 5, The Fall of Slade, and this, Volume 6, Arkham. So Batman vs. Deathstroke actually doesn't have a volume numbering, which is really weird, but it is called Batman vs. Deathstroke. It contains issues 30 to 35, and all the arts in this entire volume is from Carlo Pagulayan. There's a couple of things to note about this generally. So issue 33 contains a mention of a critical and kind of spoilerish event that happens in Detective Comics 940. So if you haven't read that yet, you're going to have to relax if you feel like this spoils something for you. Also, while this trade here is very distinct to the rest of the Deathstroke series and feels really kind of an out of continuity almost, something does happen in here which relates to an interaction Deathstroke has with Damian Wayne that actually has a lot of impacts on the Teen Titans above it for the rest of the Teen Titans run from this point onwards. It's kind of one of these weird nested stories. It's hard to know what to read first. I wouldn't recommend reading Deathstroke before reading Teen Titans, but if you did, then at least that part would make sense. But remember, as we said in the last video in this series, Teen Titans also has lots of Batman spoilers, so there is no perfect sequencing. Please remember to be a Type J reader. After Batman vs. Deathstroke, which is unnumbered and comes after Volume 5, you then have Volume 6, which is called Deathstroke Arkham, or rather just called Arkham. So this contains issues 36 to 40. The only thing notable here is there's a slightly wild moment in issue 36 where one of the Arkham inmates uses the phrase Wakanda Forever, referencing Black Panther and the Marvel movie. It's really weird. Like, do DC know this line was in here? Do they screen this stuff? Anyway, either way, after Deathstroke Arkham, we then see ourselves going into the Terminus Agenda. And back again for the last time. This is the Terminus Agenda, which is a Deathstroke and Teen Titans crossover only. It doesn't include Titans. As mentioned last time, the story revolves around Deathstroke trying to mentally break Damian Wayne and also sow some distrust in the team. So these are the issues. You've got Deathstroke 41, which is the prologue, Teen Titans 28, Deathstroke 42, Teen Titans 29, Deathstroke 43, and then Teen Titans 30 is the epilogue to the Terminus Agenda. In terms of Deathstroke 43, it ends with Deathstroke being quote-unquote dead, which is why the next volume, which we're going to talk about in just a second, is called R.I.P. So back at the map, we have the Terminus Agenda here, which we just talked through, and then Deathstroke being the lower line here, then continues on with Deathstroke Volume 7, volume with a small v, which is called R.I.P., and this just contains issues 44 to 50. The reason that I put it all the way over here is pretty much all of those issues are tied into Year of the Villain, but again, these are token optional tie-ins. So issue 44 is the R.I.P. Prelude and is in this volume, and then we have issue 45, The Offer, 46, Dark Gifts, 47, Even Unleashed, 48, Doom Rising, which is to be continued in a Jericho one-shot, which is Deathstroke 49, which is the Year of the Villain Jericho one-shot, and that's to be ended in the series finale, which is Deathstroke 50. That's a double-sized issue, Deathstroke 50, and is collected in here. It's a bit of an annoying finale to Deathstroke because it actually requires you to have some understanding of both the Dark Multiverse and the Dark Knight's Metal event all the way back here. So even though Deathstroke wasn't part of this event, in issue 50, the finale of the series, it does reference Dark Knight's Metal as an event. So that's kind of annoying, but again, you may well have read Dark Knight's Metal by this point, and if you haven't, once you read Deathstroke, that'll be an incentive for you to go away and explore other parts of the DC Rebirth universe. All of those issues, like I say, are branded Year of the Villain. However, to read those, you do not need to read the Year of the Villain stories to understand what's going on in Deathstroke. You will be fine. It works by itself. Similarly, if you want to read Year of the Villain, you obviously don't need to read Deathstroke. And I have an entire video that's about an hour long about Year of the Villain in section 3 of this reading guide. Okay. That's it. That's the entirety of Deathstroke. A lot simpler and with many fewer crossovers than the Teen Titans were. It ends there. Like I say, let's have a quick rattling run through. You have the 3 trades. You have the Lazarus contract. You have trade 4. You then go to trade 5. You then go to the Batman versus Arkham one, which is Batman versus Deathstroke, which is great. You then have Deathstroke Arkham, Terminus Agenda, and then Deathstroke RIP. You can ignore No Justice. You can pretty much ignore Dark Knight Metal, and you can ignore Year of the Villain. You can just read that if you are the quintessential Deathstroke fan. Hopefully that was helpful.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at @IamThomasJudge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.